Things Good podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Good podcast. I'm your coach and your host, Jovanna. Today, we are going to be speaking to, again, we're back with Alan Mueller. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Am I?
It's funny. You actually are, but
Okay.
there's a backstory. My father's German, and so his name is Günther Herbert Siegfried Müller, and they used
Oh.
to say it Mueller. But then, in the U.S., we started calling it Mueller, and so what you said is actually closer to the original German. Way to go!
Awesome. He is a sought after keynote speaker. He is a leadership trainer. He's an author and he's an improv comedian. Thank you so much, Alan, for joining me once again. Last
Definitely.
time you were on, we had such a great conversation. You have so many tools under your belt, and we kind of briefly touched everything that you do. So amazing. But today, I want to dive deeper into emotional intelligence.
Yeah, yeah.
You ready
It's
for this conversation?
I'm so ready. I'm so ready. It's like my everyday conversation is how can we make leaders and managers and just humans more emotionally intelligent? Yes.
Right, right. So, starting with that, okay, so many people like emotional intelligence is the number one thing that people are seeking right now. They're talking
Yeah.
about it, they're claiming to have it.
Yeah.
I'm so emotionally intelligent. Are you
Yeah.
really, though?
Are
Are,
you
are
though?
we really?
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
how do we actually get to the point of emotional intelligence? What is the intelligence? What is the journey to emotional intelligence?
I mean, I think part of it starts with humility. You have to know that you don't know, right? And so part of being an emotionally intelligent leader is being self-aware. One of my dear friends and colleagues, her name's Dr. Kelly Dixon. Everybody just calls her Dr. K. Dr. K, for her dissertation, did a study, and in the study, they looked at information on how teams rate their bosses as far as how self-aware those bosses are. And it's not good news, my friend. It is like 15% of bosses are like self-aware. That means that 85% are not, right? And so to be self-aware, that humility piece, you have to sit down with yourself and go, I don't know all the answers. I'm probably never going to know all the answers. I'm an imperfect being, but I'm going to keep trying. And if you can have that level of honest conversation with yourself, then you can start asking questions to be more self-aware. And self-awareness is a huge part of emotional intelligence because self-awareness is what am I good at? What am I not good at? Right. And being honest with yourself. I joke with people. I use the Myers-Briggs personality type a lot, indicator a lot. And I say the reason I love the Myers-Briggs is I know if I prefer extroversion or introversion, that's a preference. The Myers-Briggs only cares about your preferences. If I prefer extroversion, I'm going to reach out to people more. If I prefer introversion, I'm going to reach internally more. But here's the thing, I know my preferences. A lot of tests out there, strengths finders, others are trying to measure how good you are at something. Well,
Mhm.
here's where self-awareness shows up. If I had a quiz and it was like, Alan, scale of 1 to 10, how good of a dancer are you? How good of a driver are you? And how good of a singer are you? I'd give myself a 9, a 10, and a 10. I don't think that if anybody watched my actual dancing, I'm nowhere close to a 9. Ask my wife about my driving, probably nowhere close to a 10. Singing, I can actually sing. But self-awareness is me saying to myself, I know my limits. I know what I can't do yet. And I know it's going to take more work for me to do. And that level of honesty with yourselves is scary for some people. It's scary.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so the journey begins with humility and then
Yes.
self-awareness. I
Humility. Yeah.
That is a big factor, especially humility. I mean, oh my God, admitting that you are wrong, admitting that, well, that goes along with accountability, but just being able to receive correction and
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
that's a big one, especially within the work field.
Especially in your work environment. And the thing too is gender shows up in this, right? Because I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, us dudes, the egos are fragile, right? Us dudes are, men broadly are more attached to their personal ego, in general. And there's a lot of psychology about this. There's a great book called Women's Ways of Knowing about how women's identity develops over their lifetime. And there's similar books about men. And as women develop their sort of identity, it's this amazing patchwork of career is part of it, friends are part of it, family is part of it, hobbies are part of it, passions are part. There's this whole thing. Whereas, meanwhile, men, when they're building their identity, it's like, yeah, hey, 98% my job and then maybe 2% sports, right? And so,
Mm,
like the fact that men trick ourselves into thinking that our work is who we are instead of
mm,
just a part of who we are is why men have a hard time acknowledging when they don't know something at work. They don't want to be seen as not knowing because that's quote unquote weakness, right? And they're it's attached to their ego, right? And so in the 80s and 90s, business classes were teaching people never admit you don't know something. And that is BS. That is 100% false. I tell people in my book, which is Leading with Emotional Intelligence, I say, look, the leaders today, what leaders today need to do is when you're asked a question that you don't know, say one phrase and then add one word on the back end. The phrase is, I don't know. And
mhm.
then the one word is yet.
Right.
That's it right there. Boldly say, I don't know the answer yet, because yet is a clue to your whole team. Hey, I don't know the answer, but we're going to figure it out together. The one other thing I'll say is that I recognize that leaders I work with, that for all leaders, it takes courage to say, I don't know yet, for all leaders.
Mm,
But that courage is increased about 10 times when you go from men to women. In other words, for women to stand up in the workplace and say, I don't know yet, there's a higher social cost. Then you put on top of that, if the woman happens to be a black woman, happens to be a Latina woman, etc., there's an even higher cost, right?
right.
Because if I say I don't know yet, my coworkers, the people reporting to me, they're not going home going, white dudes, am I right? Like in other words, I mean, some people might in this day and age, but it's not a trope that has held my people down. You follow? So if if white dudes have earned a trope, we've earned a trope the old fashioned way, and it's actually ours, and it's because that's because of who we've been, right? And so as opposed to the tropes used to hold women down in the workplace, used to hold down racialized minorities in the workplace, and of course at the intersection is women who are also racialized minorities, that intersecting identity piece. And so the saying I don't know, leaders need to do it, and I acknowledge the cost is different for different leaders, and we got to be real about it. Yeah.
Right. Now you mentioned something. It made me think because about you were talking about bosses not being self-aware. Just a quick story. My boss one day, he love him to pieces. He's a great guy. Um, but one day he I didn't like the way that he spoke to me. And
Uh-huh.
he wasn't aware of the way he spoke to me. And I'm not going to say that I'm better than anyone, but I feel like there's a way to be spoken to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, during, you know, so whenever they took place, I let it slide and I went
Okay.
home. I
Right.
was
Right.
pissed off. I was mad. Excuse me, I'm wheezing a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on. I might be coming up with the cold, but
Oh no. Oh no.
um, so yeah. And then the next day, I was self aware that I was still upset with my boss, and he
Right.
can feel the tension and the friction. And he goes,
Yeah.
"Is everything okay?" And I said, "You know what? Honestly, I didn't like the way that you spoke to me yesterday.
Yep.
I
Yep.
said, I understand this, and that. However, I am not this, and that. And I would appreciate if you speak to me in a different tone." And
Yeah.
he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't even," like, that was exactly his reaction. "Oh, I didn't even realize it." I'm like, so a lot of the times people can go through their day to day, and me myself, like, I'm not always self aware, but I try to practice it on my own time.
Right.
I'm like, okay, I need to calm down. I'm getting a little heated, or I need to calm
Right.
down because
Right.
But I can say that a lot of bosses do not have that. And
No, no.
and how do you think? So
But let
what
me
do you
tell
think
you
about my
that
correction to that? What do
but
you think
that
about
but
my
what I'm
correction to that?
what I'm saying is that conversation was probably part of his leadership journey. That
Mm-hmm.
conversation could be part of his self-awareness journey, right? So when someone who you work with says something to you about, I didn't appreciate to be spoken to that way, then that hopefully they'll listen, hopefully they will
Mm-hmm.
internalize, and hopefully they'll do better. And that
Right.
right there, that's growth. That's getting a little more self-aware. when someone else shows the grace to show you a mirror from the outside, it doesn't feel like grace. It feels like you're being attacked because, we don't like to be criticized. However, the reality is that's a gift you gave him. You gave him a gift, right? Also, it was you advocating for yourself. But like that gift, hopefully that gift is going to help someone in the future. You follow?
Right.
And so there have been times in my life, especially when I was like in college, when my self-awareness wasn't so much there, right? And I would say things that now when I think back, I'm like, oh, dude, you shouldn't have said that. Like that was the wrong way to say it. And, sometimes it was about a community that I wasn't part of, or just a misunderstanding that I had, something that my elders had taught me that was faulty, that that I didn't have that self-awareness in my youth. And I wish I could go back to Alan, at 18, 19 years old and shake him and be like, dude, don't say that. Pause and put yourself in another person's position for just
Right.
a second. The things that over time I have learned, thankfully. But let me just tell you, the way I have learned them is because, just like you did with your boss, I had people teach me. I had people teach me to be better. I had people in
Mhm.
communities that I was not being, definitely not being in solidarity with, but also definitely kind of leaning into stereotypes or leaning into misunderstandings or judging. And I had people pull me in and be like, hey, man, listen, let me tell you about my community. And maybe that community was the Black community. Maybe it was the LGBT community. But whatever it was, I was saying something that wasn't very aware of where I was and aware of my own privilege, and gracefully, I had all these elders take me aside and pour into me and teach me to do better. And that was part of my self-awareness journey, right? As
Mhm.
my own, like I never felt my whiteness. I never felt it as an adolescent. I never felt it in high school. I felt it like once or twice in high school, but I didn't feel it. And then in a lot of white people, it's like that too. And then someone says, that behavior, that's a white guy thing, right? And you're like, uh, oh, wait, all of us white people, we tell ourselves it's an everybody thing. That's the myth we tell ourselves. Oh, this is how everybody is. No, 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 that's how we are. And we're just
Right.
projecting it out there. And someone at some point is like, that's not everybody, right? That's y'all, right? And I'm like, oh, wait, yeah. So not everybody puts raisins in their potato salad. I'm joking about the potato salad, but you know what I'm saying, where you have this light bulb goes off that the way you were raised is not the way everyone was raised,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, right. And now you talk a lot about personality. So you have a book with leading with personality, right?
That's coming out soon. It's coming out like in
Okay.
about a month and a half, leading with personality. Yeah.
Awesome. So how does personality and emotional intelligence, how is there, what gap is between that?
Oh my
Or
gosh. Yeah, no, they connect so deeply. And so one of the things that I use is the Myers-Briggs. We talked about this personality,
Mhm.
right? And so one of the first things people know about that is that people have an introvert preference or an extrovert preference. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what that actually means. People sometimes extroverts say introverts are shy or
Mhm.
reserved, but if you ask introverts, they're like, I'm not shy. I just don't want to go hang out with y'all, right? Or, there's more to it than that. Meanwhile, introverts will look at the extroverts and be like, oh, y'all are loud. And extroverts are like, I don't feel loud. And so there's all this misunderstanding. And so part of our personality, and this is all based on the work of Carl Jung, and then this woman, Isabella Briggs Myers, who the test is named after. And so, like, the reality is, they think, and I agree, that we are born hardwired with like a preference to be more extroverted or more introverted, just like right-handed, left-handed.
Mhm.
I've raised two children. I've never done anything to encourage them to be right-handed. They just are. And
Right.
so the same kind of thing where Jung and Isabella Briggs Myers, they think you're born with an extrovert preference or born with an introvert preference. Well, that's part of our personality. And how do we navigate that? How do we um work across difference, right? Now, Isabella Briggs Myers in her book, she says extroversion, being an extrovert, is the privileged identity, and introvert is not. So when I'm in workshops, I'm like, extroverts, how often do you think about the introverts in your office and how good they are at introverting, quote unquote? And extroverts are like, I don't think about that. I'm like, right. But trust me, there are introverts in your office who look at you, your ability to make small talk, and this I can tell from your smile that you understand what I'm talking about. That look at you and say and go, "Oh wow, that's so interesting the way they extrovert." And that's privilege. That's privilege. Something you don't have to think about that people on the other side have to think about. And so in the workplace, people get rewarded for speaking up, for being assertive, this, that, and the other. Any college class you've ever taken, every college class I ever took, when I saw the little part that said class participation 20 points, you know what I'd say to myself? I'd be, woohoo, free points, right? 20 points for free. Meanwhile, every classmate of mine in that same class who had an introvert preference, they're going through a process. They're going through, okay, how much do I have to talk
Mhm.
to get those points? Do I need those points to get the grade I want to get? How much talk, there's this whole thinking you have to do. And so if you got two groups, one of whom has to think about things all the time to navigate, and one that doesn't, that's privilege right there. And so extroversion
Mhm.
and introversion, a lot of people don't talk about it like it's privilege, but it is. It is. The world celebrates extroverts. The world misunderstands and stereotypes introverts. Did I tell you
Mm.
my example about introverts and men and women? Did I tell you about this?
Uh-uh.
There's this phrase in workshops. I'll split up extroverts and introverts, and I'll say to the extroverts, how many of y'all know the phrase resting Mitch face with an
Oh
M?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I guess we talked about this on the last time. The bottom line is there's stereotypes that women who are introverts have to deal with that men who are introverts don't have to deal with, right? So this is introversion and extroversion is part of it, but there's more to the Myers-Briggs. And I get so jazzed about the second letter, especially because the second letter is the mystery of how everybody you talk to hears you,
Mm.
how everybody you send an email to reads that email, that the second letter at the end of the day is your psychological eyes. And so
Mm.
everybody I speak, every time I do a keynote speech, half my audience is what we call sensing. They want details. They want an outline. You know the type. They want some structure. They want
Yes.
my PowerPoint to be very, very put together, and they want to know how close we are to the end and all, right? That they want it to be organized in a certain way that, and they want detailed information. That's sensing. They want their senses satisfied. Meanwhile, the other half of the audience is what we call intuitive, which is
Mm-hmm.
intuition. The intuitive, I could tell them some interesting story where the fact is that in 1772 this happened on this date, whatever. And the intuitive people, they're not going to remember the date. They're not going to. Like me in history class in high school, couldn't remember the dates. But what I could remember is what led to what led to what. I could
Mm.
remember the connections. So sensing people absorb everything they read, hear, everything around the world, in the world around them, like it's an outline. Intuitive people absorb the world around them like it's a story, and it's a story that may or may not connect to my story. And
Mm.
so once you understand that every audience, the audience listening to us right now, half of them are like, when are they going to get to the bullet points to tell me how to be more emotionally intelligent? And the other half of them are really loving the stories and the tangents that I'm going on. And so that first crowd, that's sensing. If you just thought to yourself when you're listening to this, man, I wish they would just give me a one, two, and three, that you're probably sensing. And the other one is like, man, I wish you could tell me another story that like resonates with me deeply about my experience. You're probably intuitive, right? And so once people
Yes.
understand that, it's a huge part of our personality. It's a huge part because everything we hear, see, everything you're taking in through senses or you're taking in through intuition. And once people
Mm.
know that, it's very powerful, very powerful. Yeah.
Those are interesting concepts that I never actually quite acknowledged. You said sensing and intuitive. See, I'm actually a bit of both, which is
Oh, yeah.
interesting. And when it
And
comes to being introvert and extrovert, obviously I can balance both of those because there's a lot of times where I'm just like, I just need to be by myself.
uh-huh.
Um, but I like the fact that you're bringing this into light because it helps us to have some type of understanding of who we're dealing with. Now,
Yeah.
how does this personality awareness deepen emotional intelligence?
Well, so let me tell you something about what you just said, and then I'll answer that question too. But you said, extrovert and introvert, I do both. Well, sure. I'm right-handed, but when I drive a car, I use both hands. So
Mhm.
as grown adults, we all use both. The thing about the Myers-Briggs is it's trying to kind of figure out when you're not overanalyzing, when it's like is your default introvert or extrovert? Like we got a default. Is your default, give me those details, give me that outline, give me those facts? or is your default, give me that story that connects my life to your life and so in other words, we can all do both, but one of them is our default when we're not overthinking about it. And
Okay.
so I love the way you said it because it's like driving a car with both hands. You can be right-handed and still drive a car with both hands. You can be introverted and still use extrovert. You can be sensing and still use intuition.
Right.
But the question is just down to if somebody throws me a pen and says, Alan, jot this down, I don't pause and debate which hand I'm going to use. I just use my right hand. I don't, when I'm not thinking about it, I got the default. And so that's what this extrovert introvert thing is.
Okay.
It's not all of who you are. It's just the default when all other things are equal, if that makes sense.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but as far as how that deepens emotional intelligence, I mean, think of it this way: if talking to your extroverted audience, right? Many extroverts don't understand that introverts sometimes wear headphones in public without listening to anything. And when I break in, I can tell from by the fact you're smiling that you may have done this yourself, right? And so that's when I get extroverts broken up in a room and I say extroverts, look across the room. I said, how many extroverts listen, put their headphones in, but don't listen to anything? And they look at me so confused. They're like, why would anybody put the headphones in and not even listen to like, what are you doing with the headphones? You just put them in your ear, but you don't press play? Like what? And meanwhile, on the other side of the room, all the introverts are like giggling. Ha, ha, ha. We know what's happening because we know what this is about. And then I say to extroverts, I'm like, extroverts, you got to understand. For an introvert, sometimes the headphones are a way to play music or your favorite podcast. Sometimes they are a social boundary. They are a
Mm,
barrier that they are bringing with them to say, I don't want to talk to you, right?
right.
And then that one moment, extroverts become a little more emotionally intelligent because the
Mm,
next time an extrovert sees someone with headphones, now for the first time in their life, because they were confused 2 minutes ago, now for the first time in their life, they're going to go, oh, they're probably enjoying some music, or they just don't want to talk to people. And
mhm.
so that one more aha moment, that's one more step on the journey to emotional intelligence. It's every new aha moment you have about someone who's different than you is
Right.
one more step on the journey, right? And so that's how this understanding of personality can play in. The sensing and intuitive thing, I do this thing, I show a picture, and the picture is like these children riding on a rhinoceros. There's birds, there's trees, there's all this, it's like this interesting sort of looks like it's from like a fantasy book. And when I get people to describe it, half the people go, there were three blackbirds, one bluebird, two children sitting on a rhino. The rhino's wearing a blue and green sweater. There's a woman hiding behind a rock. There are 10 trees, seven gravestones. That's how they describe it. The other half of the group says, yeah, so the two kids are on a journey, and the woman behind the rock is their guardian. She's looking out for them on their journey to make sure they're safe, and there's danger coming soon, but she's going to protect them. They're telling a story of stuff that's inside the picture, not what's on the picture, so to speak.
Right.
And then they look at each other and they're like, "What picture were you looking?" Like the people telling the story, they're like, "There was how many what birds?" Like they're not counting anything, right? That's one more step towards emotional intelligence. You realize half the room looked at the picture like you, saw that it was a fantasy picture. They're expecting a hobbit or an elf to walk out of the building, whatever. They think there's a journey happening. Meanwhile, the other half of the room is cataloging every little detail of the picture and didn't talk about a story at all. And
Mm,
that's humbling because it reminds you, oh, my way of seeing things isn't the only way. And two, it helps you build emotional intelligence because next time you're talking to someone, you got to think, are you the someone who counted how many birds were in the picture?
right.
Or are you the someone who thought that the Hobbit was about to come out of or that there was a story in there? And once you realize that everyone you speak to is one of those two people, it changes how you communicate. I mean,
Right.
especially if you're like me, I do like large workshops for groups and trainings and keynote speeches. And when I'm on a stage, if I'm going to be a good keynote speaker, I need to understand half my audience wants a graph with some stats, and the other half wants a story about this person that beat the odds. And the story tells what's happening on the story is about what happened on the graph, right? I used to run a career center, and I would always show the board of trustees at my college. These are our statistics on students getting jobs after college. And I showed them the statistics. And I'm like, and now here's the story of Jessica. Jessica was a first generation college student who got an internship with XYZ, got a job, blah, blah, blah. This is the story of Jessica. And I'm talking to two different audiences. It's the same audience, but it's two different audiences. Yeah.
Right. I love that. And being able to apply that within the work field or within just your
Yeah.
day-to-day living, looking at
Yeah.
who you're speaking to, how do they process things? Are they an introvert? Are they someone who, likes this particular way of communication rather than another particular way? So I think that's all very, very helpful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
what else would you say? We talked about humility, we talked about self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is obviously the key.
It's
It's
huge. It's
it's
huge.
it's key.
Uh-huh.
So what else besides self-awareness? What are some other things that we can add to this list to help people on their emotional intelligence journey?
Oh my gosh. So in my book, I use an acronym and it's LEADING. It's listening, um, uh, empathy, awareness of self and others. So we were just talking about that self-awareness piece. D is development. De- uh,
Mm,
I is intercultural awareness. N is navigating the emotional expectations of others. And I want to come back to that in just a second. Navigating others' emotional expectations. And then G is the growth mindset. And so now I'm going to work my way back up. Growth mindset is look, all leaders, you're going to mess up. We're good. You're talking to somebody who took 7 years to finish college. When I finished college, I had a 2.16 GPA, right? My friends graduated magna cum laude and summa cum laude. I graduated thank the laude. Like, can't believe this dude even made it, right? The growth mindset is I am going to mess up, but every time I mess up, can I do better next time? That's the growth mindset. So I'm going to go from G to N. N is navigating the emotional expectations of others. This is where my book is a little different from most books about emotional intelligence. Most books about emotional intelligence will tell you you better manage your emotions at work. That's what they tell you. You got to manage your emotions at work. Every book I read like that, I'm like, managing your emotions at work. Yeah, I get why that's good. But for whose benefit is that? For
right.
whose benefit is that? And so I thought to myself, if women were running the workforce in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s during the Industrial Revolution, if women had been running everything, do you think we'd be talking about in books managing your emotions at work? No. That is distinctly men enforcing misogyny, right? So in my book, I don't say you need to manage your emotions. I say you need to navigate the emotional expectations of these other people, the
Mm,
patriarchy of the system of whatever. And so it's the same and it's different because I'm just naming that managing your emotions to me sounds like every man I've ever heard put some woman think he's putting some woman in her place, right? It just felt like that to me. So navigating the
mm,
emotional expectations of others. I is intercultural awareness. I could do a whole podcast on that, which is, hey, if you're white, ask yourself, how does that make my life easier? If you're a man, if you're not disabled, if you're cisgender, if you're college educated, if you're middle class, if you're any of these things, can you spend some mental energy and some time thinking about what you don't have to do that members of the opposite community do have to do, right? And so it starts there. It starts there. And I think last time we talked about my TED talk. Did we talk about the
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The bathroom.
the bathroom thing and how I worked at a women's college and for the first time in my life I had to wait to go to the bathroom, right? So that's intercultural awareness. I'm LEAD. So D is development. D is development, and that is that everybody listening, if you've got a job, you got a workplace, find out what conferences there are in your industry. Find out what books there are in your industry. You might be at quote unquote a low level in your organization, but you know what? Get curious about the organization. Get curious about the history of it. Get curious about the best practices. Get curious about your competitors, right? You work at
Mm,
FedEx. Get very curious about UPS and what the culture's like over there. But development is, and this is the thing too, y'all. The internet is trying its hardest, and AI is now pitching in to try to kill curiosity, right? The internet started to try to kill curiosity, and it tried and tried, and it's done it a little bit. It's hurt curiosity. AI is like, oh, my friend, I'm going to help you really, really kill curiosity, but we
mm,
can't let it, listeners. We can't let it. And what I mean by that is, AI's got a place. It's a tool,
right.
but it's just a tool. It is not the answer. It is just a tool. We people have to find the answer, and we need to use the tool when we need it and not when we don't. It's not going to tell us the truth. It's not going to tell us all it can do is reflect everything that's out on the internet and just give it back to us. That's all. It's a giant mirror of the internet. But the bottom line is that development means work on yourself, grow yourself, get curious. So LEA, so I'm down to LEA. A is awareness. We were just talking about that. E, going back up, E is empathy. Empathy,
Mm,
empathy, empathy. Oh my gosh.
that's a big
Understand,
one.
it's huge. It's huge because I used to come, I came from a culture that was, if someone was late to work, you shamed them or you judged them secretly or you thought, well, they're not good enough or whatever, whatever, whatever. And then at some point, somebody said, if someone's late to work, your first thought should be, I hope you're okay. I hope they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed everything for me
Mm,
because there's this perfection culture, and this perfection culture, it intersects whiteness, definitely, like the way white people make sense of the world. It intersects the manosphere, as they say, right? But it's also, it's bigger than just white culture or man culture. It's bigger than that. It's this thing
right.
that's pervaded and become this perfectionist culture where we think mistakes are bad and we shame people. And so, like, instead, what if we gave people grace? Because I don't know about you, I'm human. I have bad days, right? And so, empathy is, why don't you start with, hey, are you doing okay navigating life? Everybody's life is hard, y'all. Everybody's life is hard. People don't talk about it, but people's lives are hard. We each have things. So let's start there and let's give grace. And empathy is that process. It's going, hey, I don't know what's happening in their life, but because I don't know what's happening in their life, I'm going to be slow to judge, my friend. I'm going to be quick to offer aid, check in. I'm going to be slow to judge. Um, and then back to the top of the list, L is listening. Everything
Yes.
starts with listening. If you don't listen, you can't lead. And many people who've called themselves leaders don't listen. And so I know they're not actually leading. I actually am part of an organization and we have a new leader, and that leader has proven over and over and over again he does not listen. And he has other great leadership qualities, but if you're not listening to those you're leading, how are you going to know how to use those qualities in any meaningful way for your group? Right. Yeah.
Right.
So listening is a lost art. In the US, we do not listen much. We don't listen well. We don't listen deeply. My wife's a counselor. The technique of active listening, counselors do active listening, which
Right.
is you say something and then they say to you, what I think I hear you saying is, and they rephrase it back to you. And so counselors do this all the time. Guess what? Leaders can do that too. Guess what? Spouses can do that too.
Right.
Siblings can do that too. Friends can do that too. Just because counselors use it as a technique doesn't mean we can't use it. Doesn't mean that I can't slow down. And when my wife says something, me say, I think what you're getting at is this. Is that right? It shows that I'm listening. It shows that I'm trying to get it right. Listening not just to respond, but listening to understand, right?
Right.
And that's missing. Our society is losing that. And listeners, don't let us lose it. We can change the tide. We can do it by listening to each other more deeply. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. And I love the fact that just this topic alone, I know we're focusing primarily on leadership within, the work field or, in corporate,
Perf-
but this emotional intelligence goes for every relationship, every aspect of our lives. And I love the fact that you mentioned that, we're not listening, or we can use that active listening in our relationships, because a lot of people are losing connection because number one, they're not listening.
yeah.
Number two, they have no empathy. They're
Yep.
not understanding to people's situations.
Yep.
And I know there's also boundaries. I'm very firm on my boundaries.
Yeah.
So there, I give grace.
Yep.
But
Yep.
once I'm done, I'm done.
Right,
So,
right.
right. So,
It's like I'm going to give you this much stretching, and then at some point we got to let go. Yeah, this much stretching, and at some point you
and
got to let go. Yeah.
and to me, I feel like that's healthy. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean boundaries. My friend Dr. K, who I mentioned earlier, Dr. Kelly Dixon, we just call her Dr. K. She said to me something once, and this is why I admire her so much. She said, "You can tell a lot about a person by the boundaries they set with other people."
Mm,
And two, she's got a lot of wisdom. One of the things I love about her is that if I send her an email after 5 p.m. on a weekday, there's an auto email ready to go. And the
Yes.
auto email says something to the effect of, I am practicing self-care right now. And it's sort of like saying, and why aren't you? Like, why are you emailing at this time? Right. And that's a boundary, right? And she is really, really good at setting and honoring boundaries and teaching others. She's a member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority, which is part of the Divine Nine, and she does trainings with Zeta. Like she does trainings all over the country with the women of Zeta, and like teach and it's different to teach a workshop about boundaries, but she models it. She shows people this is how you navigate boundaries, and you can do it kindly. And this
Right.
goes back to to personality types and awareness. There's another letter in the Myers-Briggs, feeling or thinking. That's the third letter. And
Mhm.
the feeling people sometimes, if you enforce some boundaries, they'll be, oh, you don't like me anymore. Like,
Right.
hold on, hold on. Maybe it's because I like you that I want us to have reasonable boundaries so that I will continue to like you, right? So, um, right, so, or just because I need to protect my mental health and I really, really like you, and I got other friends and other families that I got to spend time with or whatever. And so,
Right.
so that the enforcing boundaries and being honest about it, but also being generous about it is huge. It's huge. Where it's
Mm.
like, these are my boundaries. I'm not setting these because I don't like you. I'm not saying these to be mean or to be passive aggressive. I'm setting these because this is what I need to preserve me. And there's a
Right.
lot of people counting on me. I have a lot of relationships and I got to protect me because those different people need me. And you're one of those people. And so this boundary is for you too, right?
Right.
And so setting boundaries, but it's tricky though, especially like relationships. It's relationships are another thing. I mean, like going back to the introvert extrovert thing, first 3 years of my marriage, oh my gosh, I was always asking my wife, "Are you mad? Is something wrong? Are you mad? What's wrong?" Okay,
That's
so
me. That's how I am.
right, where I'm overly checking in because I think, well, quiet means there's a problem. But you're right. This is whether it's Myers-Briggs personality, whether it's the big picture of leading with emotional intelligence, listening helps in partnerships. Empathy
Mhm.
helps in partnerships. Like so much of this helps. And so it's about being a better human, right? I was doing a
Yes.
workshop, just Friday, Thursday or Friday last week, and we were talking about what is leadership and this and that. And this one guy was like, "Well, yeah, what if the leader has everything you want the leader to have at work, but then you find out that at home they are a jerk?" I'm like, "Hmm, that means that at work they're playing empathy, they're playing listening, they're playing a role." Because if they're a jerk at home, they're still a jerk at work and they're just covering it up, right?
Right.
Integrity is you're the same you at work and at home. And I don't mean, I understand now that I say that out loud, I understand that different folks have to have their work self for their own protection.
Mhm.
But what I mean is in terms of treating others. If you treat others poorly at home, it's just a matter of time before you treat people poorly at work or vice versa,
Right.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely agree. I've seen that situation myself where in leadership, I mean, when they were out and they were ministering or talking to other people, everything was so empathetic, so understanding. But the minute it came to the in-house core team and family, it was just like, oh, where's that same understanding for me?
That's
It's
hypocrisy. And
scary.
it's scary and it's a kind of compartmentalizing that is very unhealthy. And I saw, I ran this a cappella concert at this university, and there was this group from a like a pretty conservative evangelical university that came up to be like our guest singers, like our sort of like blanking on the name, like our headliner, right? We had all the student a cappella groups that were competing, but we always needed like 30 minutes for the judges to tabulate the score. So we'd always bring in a headliner. And this group, it was from a distinctly faith-based college. And I watched them rehearse, and their music director was talking to them like I would not talk to a dog. Their music director was dropping F-bombs right, left, and center, which I'm not saying that in and of itself is bad, but he was talking to them in a demeaning way, right?
Right.
You can use cuss words in ways that are not demeaning, right?
Yes.
Like, damn, Miss Smith, this pie is amazing. That's not
Right.
cursing, right? But this guy was cursing. He was demeaning these folks. And I'm like, y'all are from that little Christian university down the road? Because that's what I was, that's what I thought y'all were, huh? Right. And so because he wasn't on stage. It was just a rehearsal. Who am I? I'm the producer. Like, he didn't know he doesn't think I mean, he knew I was there, but he didn't care. And the way he talked to those people, I'm like, friend, those are children of God. Those are young people. Those are future leaders. Why are you talking to them like that?
Right.
Why you got to talk to them like that? And because too, I know as soon as the stage lights are on, you're going to be all smiles, and you're going to be smiles and talking about Jesus too. And I'm like, yeah, but you see, I just saw you like 2 hours ago. You were not acting anywhere close, Anyway, so I can tell you, and I know we know the story. We know the story,
Yes.
which is sometimes a performance is a performance
Right.
and reality is still reality. And real leaders, um, it's not a performance. Real leaders are not perfect, but real leaders bring their best at home and at work. Real leaders bring empathy and grace for others. And it's true that we give our partners the least grace of all. A lot of times we
Mhm.
give our family the least grace of all. There are things that my best friend can get away saying to me that I would take harder from my wife, right? But knowing that is self-awareness. Knowing that, and then if I hear my wife say something going like, "Well, if your friend told you that," and I'm like, "Yep," and your wife is also your friend, so listen up, friend. You listen.
Yeah.
She has something to say, right? And so yeah, so it's and two, let's just be real. Men, I don't know how many men are listening, but men, we gotta do better. Men, we have to. We are not sitting around debating. I don't know if you remember on the internet a couple years ago who you'd want to be stuck in the woods with, a bear or a man. I don't know if you remember
Okay. Yes. I
those
do
going
know.
around, right? Trust me, men, we are not sitting around going, are we more safe with a woman or a wild animal? Like, we are not having that discussion. That is not a real discussion. And even though, men, I know it hurt our feelings, and it was a little bit of an exaggeration, maybe, but listen to the point, man. Listen to the point. The point is the bar is low. All you got to do is prove yourself safer than a bear. That is not a high bar, my friends. Like I tell my younger son, I'm teaching my younger son about consent and what consent means. And I'm like, dude, the bar is low. If you just listen and just understand the fundamental of consent, you're going to be like in the top 5% of men in the world, right? And that's sad. It's sad that you're going to be that it's that easy to get to the top 5% of men,
Right.
but that's where you start. And then you show other men the way, right? This is the thing. Men have to call out other men, um, because there's women sitting around going, a bear. Maybe I'll take my chances, right? Like, yeah, yeah,
It's so sad. I mean, even now, I thought that we were progressing in that area when it came to men, to masculine and feminine, and where we were learning how to work with each other and have patience. But I'm still seeing that there's a lot of division still in this
there
day
is. There is.
where, women are blaming men and men are not being understanding. And it's just like, I feel like there are men who are doing the work. Let's give
Yeah.
them some credit.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
men who are
Yes.
waking up and healing and taking the initiative. Then you
Right.
have another part that who just
Yeah.
they're
Right.
still they're still
Just
back.
doing that thing. And we used to legit, I worked at a college where we would during orientation, we would take all the women into one auditorium and all the men into the other auditorium. And fortunately, my supervisor, he was a feminist and womanist man. He understood that assault, for example, and mistreatment of women, that was a man issue. And he sat down and he looked at them square in the eye. He said, "Stop this, men! Stop this!" Right? And he said, and I hate this analogy. He's like, "That could be your sister, that could be your mother," and I'm like, "Look." Or they could just be a human woman, and you don't have to describe them as
Right.
being related to me for them to matter, or that part. But if that's the baby step you need right now, yes, everyone over there is somebody's sister. Okay, I'm spoon feeding you, right? And then we're over in the next room with the women, and we're working on the men, but it's a slow process. Here is your pepper spray. Here's the pepper spray we're going to give to all of you. And it's just, and they're like, "Are you blaming us?" We're like, no, we're blaming them, but we just can't get them to get there fast enough. We're chipping away every year. It's a little bit better, a little bit better, but a little bit better doesn't stop
Yeah,
those 10% of dudes, 15% of dudes from doing the worst of the worst, and
right,
the next 30% of the dudes not caring about it. And so before you know it, that's like 55% of the dudes who are either doing it or not caring about it. And then we need that 45% to step up and be like, y'all stop, don't do this, right?
right.
And so, but until we get there, hey women, here's your complimentary pepper spray. And I hate it. I hate it. It's like we are preparing you for their violence while we're sitting in their room telling them not to be violent, knowing that most of them probably won't be, but enough of them will be, that 1 in 4 women is going to experience this. Enough of them over there are going to make the statistic 1 in 4, right? And so, you know, men, if you're listening to this podcast, call another man today and be like, do you have a good
We
do
gotta
you have
do
a good
that.
do you have a good understanding of consent? If you have a son, if you have a be like, let me look up the word consent. We're just gonna look it up together in the dictionary. We're just gonna check it out. Do that, man. Call one man today. Just call one man today and just be like, hey, dude, you want to have a conversation about consent? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just have that one conversation, right? Yeah.
It's what I hear you saying is that women are more emotionally intelligently evolved than men.
Generally, at
We
most
still love
state,
men. We still love
and this is true. This is true at almost every stage of development. This
men.
is really true. There is a time, and again, so I'm going to dip back into my psychology. There is a time in like 29 to 30 where for a split second, the average man in his 30s and the average woman for a split second, men are like, oh, I'm almost caught up. And then no. Right. And so, but like all the way up to there, way behind, usually after that, pretty far behind. Or after most mature men, once they get to their 30s, they start going, oh, women have known this the whole time. I should start doing that. But they're already so behind in the chart because they've spent the first 30 years being ridiculous, right? And
Right.
so I got a friend down in Florida, down like Tampa area, and she's my age. She's like 50 something, like 51 maybe or 50. And she's like going back into the dating world a little bit. And I'm like, "Oh, friend, so sorry how shallow the pool is because I know for you to find one good dude, you're going to need to go on 10 to 15 dates to find that one. And that's not a good ratio. You know that
No,
and she's introverted too. And I'm like, the idea of thinking about 10 or 15 dates to find one good, that's probably exhausting to you as an introvert. Like, yeah, that's exhausting,
especially in Florida.
especially in right. And so, just there, we got to do better. But yeah, being emotionally intelligent with your partner, with your friends, it's important. It's important because take care of those people. Take care of those people. Yeah.
For sure. Well, Alan, this has been amazing. I do have one last question to
Okay, I'm
wrap
ready.
this up, and then we can talk about how to find you again.
Great.
For someone managing people very different from them, what is
Yes.
one mindset shift that changes everything?
So if you're managing people that are different than you, I would say find something about your identity that gives you some privilege and make a list of the funniest things you can think of about that identity.
Hmm.
In other words, if you are white and the people you supervise are not white, see if you can make a list of the top 5 funniest things about white people. If you're a man and those you're supervising are not men, make a list of the top 5 funniest things you can think about men. If you're college educated and everyone you supervise is not college educated, make a list of the funny things college grads might say. Start making fun of a culture that you're part of that gives you privilege to your
Hmm.
to yourself. You don't have to perform this. You don't have to be performative with your staff.
Right.
Start making fun of the privilege of the identities that give you privilege to yourself and a lot, and have fun with it. If you start having fun with it, the rest of your team's going to catch on to something, which is you're starting to develop humility. It's the
Hmm.
beginning of humility, is when you know how to laugh at yourself. It's the beginning of humility.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I'm gonna practice that myself. I'm gonna
There
take
you
that.
go. There you go.
Thank you so much, Alan. Again,
Definitely.
how can our listeners find you? Tell us more about your books
Yes.
Anything
So
else coming up?
yeah, adaptivechallengeconsulting.com. You can find me. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. So if you find Adaptive Challenge Consulting or Alan Mueller on LinkedIn, but we're also on Facebook, Instagram, the regular channels. And yeah, we've got 2 books out right now. The first is Leading with Emotional Intelligence. So if you like this conversation, go get the book, buy it from my website, and that helps put my kid through college. Or you can find it over on Amazon if you really like Amazon. And then my second book is Improv Comedy and the Art of Leadership, which we didn't talk about today. But if you think improv comedy is interesting and you want to be a better leader, check that out. And then the new book is coming out in about a month and a half. That's all about this Myers-Briggs stuff and personality types and getting in there and understanding what it's really all about, because people do the Myers-Briggs wrong. They use it as a label. They put people in boxes. That's not what it's there for. It's there to gain better understanding. And so that new book's coming out in about a month and a half. So get ready. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And if you can provide a link for, is there a free resource for the link to the personality test?
So yes, and so if you go to Adaptive Challenge Consulting on LinkedIn, I've got a bunch of free webinars, and
Okay.
so some of them have special guests that are experts in their field. But scroll back through the videos and find some of the webinars, because it gives you all kinds of information, how you can learn more about the Myers-Briggs on your own for free. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. This has been truly been an honor. Thank you
Thanks.
so much, and I will talk to you soon.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.